Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Mary Lauder, and you are listening to the Since You Put It That Way podcast. It's the show that examines various health, wellness, and medical topics from unique perspectives. We will be having discussions and guests that will cause you to pause and consider, well, since you put it that way. Hi, welcome. Dr. Mary Lauder here. You are joining us for another episode of Since You Put It That Way, our podcast series. And in this series, we're now into the cosmic health and wellness again with Dr. Carol Ritberger and myself, Dr. Mary Lauder, as your co-host. Today's topic is going to be grounding. You are grounded. Does not mean you're in trouble. It actually means you get well. So we're going to talk about the concept of grounding as we begin to come in better contact with the earth, what that means, electromagnetic field, and things like that. It's going to be quite interesting. And it has a positive impact upon our health. So a little bit about us as co-hosts. Carol, who will be co-hosting with me, Dr. Carol Ritberger, she holds a doctorate in theology and in esoteric philosophy and hermetic sciences. She draws upon her education in personality, typology, psychoneuroimmunology, spirituality, metaphysics, and esoteric healing. Carol then weaves these perspectives together with biology, physiology, psychology, and psychospirituality. And this results, she can uncover with her work the hidden contributors, usually through the use of metaphors and how the metaphors relate to the body, and the contributors behind illness in a credible and understanding way as a medical intuitive. And she's been a medical intuitive for decades, and so it's really fun to work with her. And while I have medical intuition in my background, it's not as extensive as Carol's, and I'm more driven through the physician line and use my intuition there as a physician as I work with all of the patients. And myself, I'm an osteopathic physician who specializes in both integrative and holistic medicine as well as family medicine. And I've practiced for 30 years, and now I want to educate and reach as many people as possible with the message that your body can heal. And you can heal your body. And you can not only get well, but you can also feel well and be well. And those are all interesting and distinct concepts. My goal is to positively disrupt medical care, positively disrupt our healthcare system, and change our system one encounter at a time. So welcome to today's podcast. Enjoy, sit back, and learn some really cool things. Welcome, everyone, and you are here listening and viewing to another episode of Since You Put It That Way and our sub-series of Cosmic Health and Wellness. And we're back with the paradox. That would be both Dr. Ritberger and Dr. Lauder being the paradox of the group here. And we've got some interesting things to talk about today. And I guess if we titled this podcast, we would call it You're Grounded. So any of you who get in trouble frequently, hope that doesn't trigger something and you want to get up and run out of the room thinking that we're actually going to put you in a timeout. Or the other title could be, Dear Earthling, You Need to Earthing. So, so we're going to talk about how we need to connect with ourselves, connect with our mother. And when I mean mother, this time I mean Mother Earth. And all about some things relative to toxicities, inflammation, and how we relate. So this is going to be a very interesting topic. This one and the next podcast after this, when that's released, they're linked together. So make sure that you listen to both because we're going to be having some very interesting conversations. So welcome, Carol, to our next section of Cosmic Health and Wellness. How have you been?
I've been good. Thank you. Well, yes, I'm very excited about this topic. It's something that's so easy, and the easy things we always tend to overlook when it comes to healing.
Right. So our topic, to give the title to it, is grounding. You're grounded. And we're going to look at how we need to connect to the earth for our health and wellness. And what's interesting is it is so obvious. And I guess even if we buried our head in the sand about this in denial, we would be grounding at that time by doing that.
Absolutely.
So
And
kind of,
probably help our brain and cognitive abilities completely.
it totally would. So I find this quite interesting that this is something that I have just started doing, and grounding for the definition of that is connecting to the direct current. That's the DC current. And there's two types of electricity, DC, which is direct current, and then AC, which is alternating current. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the origins of that, but our discussion is going to be how this grounding or being ungrounded affects our health and what's going on in medicine, in healthcare, in our personal health, and I think even our existential health. There's some components of that. So if we look at electricity, everybody thinks, at least the Americans do, I'm going to just speak for the Americans, that Benjamin Franklin invented electricity. Well, he didn't. Lightning was present. He used a key and a kite. And, I remember when I was a kid, I used a key and an electric, outlet, and it connected and hit the screw, and I got a good shock, and it blew me off the bed I was sitting on. So I didn't invent anything. I did get grounded though, but that was a different type of grounded. I got in trouble for putting a key in a light socket. So that was never good. But different kind of grounding I got there. That nice little mark on the wall, and oh boy. Anyway, so moving right along, I won't take any follow-up questions to that one. But so electricity really was unearthed, I think would be the right word, or discovered by the Greeks, is where that goes back to over 2,600 years ago. Certainly Benjamin Franklin had a connection to it using a key and a kite and a string. And then in our American history, we see both Thomas Edison and then Nikola Tesla. Now, interestingly, the word Tesla is in the news a lot with the car factory, the car manufacturer of Tesla that Elon Musk owns. And, those two gentlemen, Edison and Tesla, it's interesting because Nikola Tesla came over from Croatia, and he met up with Edison, and they were together for a total of 1 year. And this was fascinating. This was in 1884, Nikola Tesla worked with Thomas and Edison at the Edison Electric Light Company. And we know Edison Electric Light Company as GE, General Electric, which I didn't know. This is fascinating to me. And then their relationship was complicated because they were very different people and both very brainiac and driven, and their different approach to inventing. So if you were to look at Nikola Tesla's resume or CV, he was in that position for 1 year, because then he went off and started his own lab in 1885. And then he, looked at, so Tesla went one way. There was competing currents. There was the DC current that Edison liked to work with, and then the AC, or the alternating current, that Tesla kind of came up with. And he saw, as he put the conductors together, they call it a polyphase alternating current system. Well, why is that important? Well, that's what's in our homes today. And that's the AC current that we get out of the wall. So in order for us to have that AC current, we have to be grounded. And that's when the electrician, builds the home or rewires or wires the home. They literally put a rod down in the ground to ground the home. And so the entire home is grounded that way. And so you've got AC current that we buy from the electric company. And that came from Tesla, because the DC current that Edison tried to move forward was harder to control. It was more volatile, and you couldn't increase the amperage. So what does that mean? That means when you have your espresso maker, grinder, and toaster all on one circuit, you need more amps to run all of that equipment versus just a teapot. And so in order to amp up that electrical current, you have to have a circuit that can hold more, and that usually goes in your circuit board. And these are things that we know that when the circuit breaks, when the toaster doesn't work, the espresso machine goes out, those are the things that we think about electricity, or if there's a power outage with a storm. But going back into the late, 1800s, 1884, 85, 86, and there up to the I think about 1904 is really where electricity came into America. And I think that would be the Gilded Age as well, which is, part of the Industrial Revolution. And so Edison was the direct current, more in line with the earth. And then Tesla was more with the alternating current through the polyphase alternating current system. And that system actually went on to be also what we see in the grids, those power stations and the hydroelectric and things like that. And so it's just fascinating to think a little bit more about, the electricity and things like that. So how does that link into grounding? Well, the more alternating current we're exposed to, we seem to have less exposure to the direct current. And the direct current is derived from the earth. It's derived from the atmosphere, from lightning, from the atmospheric winds and solar winds up in the ionosphere. And so up there you have positive charges, and on the earth you have negative charges. And what that does is that drives electrons to be more available on the Earth's surface. And so you've got those electrons that are available that when they interact with our human electrical system, which is what we have, because we're technically electromagnetic beings, interestingly, the grounding by using a DC current actually calms our system. Now, if we were to get a jolt of lightning, obviously that would do well beyond calming our system, and that's lethal, typically. And that's not what I'm talking about, getting struck by lightning. I'm talking about the fact that you can literally connect to the earth, typically with your shoes off, stocking foot, and that could be sand, water. It can be through the concrete. It can be on the grass. All that type of thing, where we literally begin to have that connection to that DC direct current. And what the research is showing is the more connection you have to that direct current, there's a lot of health benefits. And this is literally something then that if we have changes in our health over time, which they call them what? Non-communicable diseases. Well, what's that? That's everything you don't catch from someone, right? So that's hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, neurodegenerative disorders. Those become chronic illnesses that are over time really, really compounding and interrupting the health of people because we're living longer. Because of probably many things, our food sources, stress, chemicals that we're exposed to, things like that. But one of the big things is our loss of connection or lack of connection to the earth. And I found that confounding and profound at the same time. And, Carol, you and I read the same article on this, as grounding as the universal anti-inflammatory remedy. What was your thought on that article, just as we were thinking and kind of putting together for this podcast? What was your takeaway from that?
Well, my thinking, first of all, it made just a lot of sense. That was the very first thing when I read it. And the second part is understanding that we're electromagnetic. It was so obvious. What I recognized the most was how, like your generation, my generation, but how the young people are not being as outdoors. They're not being as active. They're being more in front of computers. They're being more on their phones. They're wearing synthetic soles on their feet, so they have this insulation between earth and their own vibrational frequency. And what really struck me was that it wasn't so much, I didn't think about me and my age to try to understand the connection with what's going on in my body. I was more interested in why is this affecting the fact that we have young people getting diabetes at such a younger age. Mm-hmm. And yes, it has to do with food, and we both know this in the professions that we're in, but there's something beyond that. Mm-hmm. And that's what I found this article so interesting, is that it looked beyond the obvious of medication, looked beyond the obvious of what's creating, what is the source of it, whether, pancreas, insulin, thyroid, whatever it may be. And I thought, this is literally something so simple. Even in the recess, if we can go back and even in recess, if we could get schools to get kids to take their shoes off,
Yes.
it would make a world of difference in behavior. I felt that it would be a tremendous impact on ADD, ADHD. It was the ramifications of it in the work that I do. It was like, is it a magic bullet? No, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm stumbling. I'm stumbling over my words. I will begin to use them now. I think it is a magic bullet because it's something that's so obvious, so big. The earth is so big. It reminded me of when I went hiking on Pikes Peak. We used to live for a short period of time in Colorado Springs, and our area that we lived in backed right up to Pikes Peak. And I went up and I was going to go around this reservoir. Well, it was a lot bigger than I thought. And I got part way around and then I got lost and turned around and it got kind of scary. I mean, that was one mountain, right? Now,
Yep.
imagine that's a 14er, so meaning it's over 14,000 feet, 14,714 to be exact. And I had a good relationship with Pikes Peak. I loved it, had it, just really enjoyed it being out my window. But it was scary with how big it was, and you're lost on it. And to think of how massive the earth is and how tiny we are.
Correct.
And how we could all we have to do is take off our shoes and connect. All the earth is asking us to do is connect.
Yeah. And it would ground us. It would,
Right.
and grounding would basically cause the autonomic nervous system to just slow down.
Yes.
It would cause everything to, our breathing would slow down, our heart rate would slow down. And then that element of fear of being lost
Yes.
would maybe still be in the back of our mind, but our body wouldn't be reacting to it. We could catch our breath and we could recount where we came from, what we did. But we're so busy going and going and going that we don't take the indicators of the energy of the body to basically just say, sometimes it's like, stop, look around. Is this where you want to be?
Yeah. And we've got what I call the medical industrial complex. That's the big pharma, that's the big insurance companies, the big hospital systems, all those things that take away from the individualization of care, the personalization of care. And they're making money at it, hand over fist, while people are getting sicker, staying sicker, and being denied cares and services. And that's very concerning to me as a physician, ethically.
Oh, yes.
And then I look at this concept of grounding, and for something under $100, where you could get a couple of these mats that plug into the grounding outlet in the wall, and we'll talk about that in a minute, literally it can change your life.
Yep.
And so grounding is a concept in coming in direct contact with the direct current. And physiologically, what the studies are showing is that it decreases inflammation. It decreases pain. And you get better sleep. So if there's better sleep, there's going to be restoration because healing occurs in that restorative phase. That's one thing. There is an increased response to trauma. Well, what does that mean? Are you more traumatized? No, it means if you get injured, wounded, have a surgery, you heal faster. And there's increased blood flow. And that's one of the osteopathic tenets, is wherever there needs to be circulation, you need to optimize circulation.
Absolutely.
Circulation includes the lymphatics. It includes the veins and the arteries.
Yep.
Okay. And then it decreases blood viscosity. Well, that means the blood's not thick. It's running well. It's not clumping. It's not sludge. It's actually moving. And there is an increase of what's called heart rate variability. So that means our heart rate actually goes up more and comes down more. because we tend to be, so it's a measure of both our inward response to our environment, which is our stress response, and a measure of our outward response, which is, are we exercising? Are we going upstairs? Are we pumping our arms when we're going up a hill? Are we walking fast down the aisle at the store? Anywhere that we can change our heart rate variability. The more variability we have throughout the day, the improved resiliency that our cardiovascular system has. And they're finding now that heart rate variability, because we've been talking about hearts all summer, heart rate variability is one of the key independent risk factors for cardiovascular events,
Absolutely.
being heart attack or stroke. And all I have to do is ground. All I have to do is take my shoes off, lay on the mat, anywhere from 20 minutes to 8 hours. So how do you decide? Well, do whatever you want. Start with 20 minutes. We went and did purchase one of the sheets for the bed. And it's a fitted sheet. Just looks like a fitted sheet. It matches our sheet sets, all different kinds. And you plug that in, there's a attachment to it, a little white cord, just like a charger. And that goes into, if you've got 3 prongs, it goes into the bottom prong. That's your grounding hole in the wall. That's the DC current. And so then we measured it. My husband's an electrical engineer, so he knew all about this. I got to just follow along with that, which was kind of fun. But he has a tool that you can measure to see if there's actually the AC current present in that material after you're plugged into the wall. And there wasn't, because if there was an AC current, this meter would go up. So that could be how you could test to see if you've got a good product. And we'll put, in the resources with this podcast, just a couple of different places to look. I don't have any commercial interest in this, just good, good quality options. So then you just plug it into the wall and you go to sleep. And I would say that it's a very powerful thing, because what I found when I did it, my experience was I got really quiet. And I slept really deeply. And I actually had a detoxification type of reaction. And so then I looked at some articles for that, and there's a physician who, unfortunately, or fortunately, not only talks about grounding, but also sells what they have called the best products for grounding. So that made me a little suspicious, but they seem to allude to the fact that you don't have a detoxification reaction, that your reaction is just, there's too much AC current around and you're hypersensitive to the current. So when we measured and found that there was no AC current present on the sheet in the bedroom area, because we blocked the wall charges and things like that, the wall outlets, it had to be a detoxification reaction. There's no other thing, because it literally changes your physiology. So how could one not detoxify? And it felt like a detoxification reaction. I've had those before. And it just felt like a mild case of influenza, muscle aches, little headache, kind of nausea. And what I wanted to do was just sleep. So what I did was I didn't sleep longer on the grounding sheet. I just slept on the couch, and the couch is a leather couch, and it just felt really super comfortable. And then I walked around outside and drank a lot of water, and that went on, I want to say, almost for a week. And I had some days I felt good, some days I felt like, oh, I don't feel so good. Now I feel really good, because it's been about 3 weeks into it. And they're literally circulatory changes, sleep changes, muscle ache changes that, I can just, as a personal attestation, provide feedback from my experience, and it's different. And so people would say, well, couldn't that just be placebo, because you've suggested it to yourself that it would work? Well, that's 30%. I'm okay with that. Hyper placebo is 45 to 60%. I'm okay with that too. This doesn't feel like placebo. This feels like an actual change in my physiology. And so I've actually taken the bold move of adding it to my core steps of care for people with chronic illness.
Yeah. Well, and it just, when we get into that resting state where the nervous system, the parasympathetic is still functioning to keep us breathing, keeping everything,
Yeah.
we turn off the volume of that sympathetic part of us that's always kind of looking around, observing what's going on, very sensitive to the chemistry in the body. But when we go into the sleep state, that sympathetic system is turned off. So we go into a place of quietness and restoration. And by using this grounding process, then what it does is it just, so the metaphor that I kept getting is it's like it puts us in the womb of Mother Earth.
Yeah.
It's like it, and it's just from a metaphor standpoint and metaphysical standpoint, that is what many of the metaphysical teachings are always say, is that we were born from the belly and the womb of Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute we start to divide the cells through our mother and being in the womb, we are always in touch with Mother Earth as long as she is. And I just kept thinking when I was reading this article and thinking about it, and ordered sheets as well, is that it makes sense that, and from my perspective, is that you would have, or any of us would have, any kind of detoxification, because the body not only uses the pores of the skin to bring things to the light of day to treat them, but so does the soul. So I keep thinking that this has more to do with just turning down the rhetoric of everyday life and getting us off of that hamster wheel in our nervous system, and grounding us back to what's important, the beauty, the connection, the deep feeling of sense of belonging that we have with Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking that this is, again, kind of a magic elixir. I don't want to put too much into it to where people think you and I are on a hype on this, or we're going to get anything out of this.
Right.
But again, it's so obvious. I've said this in one of the other podcasts, is that people who are experiencing anger, I'll say to them, go outside, take your shoes off, sit underneath a tree, and see how long you can stay angry.
Hmm.
You just can't. The beauty, the vibration, the connection, whether it's your butt on the ground or your feet on the ground, it literally is it's not a grounding that we say that, oh my God, I don't want to be grounded, where the mind is like, oh, if you're grounded, you're going to be stuck, blah, blah, blah. This is literally vibration, pure vibration.
Right. And it's at a Hertz level. So there's
Yes.
a Sherman principle of where you've got the solar winds, you've got the lightning that goes on all across the earth, and then the charges that are positive up in the ionosphere, negative on the earth's surface. That gives us a Hertz level at about 6.8 Hertz. Well, then Tesla measured the surface of the earth, and he came up with 7 for the Hertz. So it's like within 2/10 between the Sherman principle of what's happening in the atmosphere, bringing that to the earth, and what's happening on the earth's surface. That's really close. So there's even a resonance between the air and the surface of the earth, our atmosphere. So certainly being out in nature, certainly the wind blowing on us, certainly the breezes and the sounds of the trees and all the things that bring a vibration, certainly can have an effect upon our soul.
Yep.
And effect upon our thoughts. And those thoughts then affect through the pineal gland, and the effect of the environment that we feel through the different energy points, which are the chakras. All that can have an influence for us for, well, I guess I would say a felt sense of grounding or grounded healing.
Absolutely. And each one of the 7 chakras in the human body has a range, except for the heart. And a lot of the research is showing that the heart frequency is about 1,000 hertz, and it's a still point. It's in the teaching of energy, it's the assemblage point where all of the higher vibration of wisdom meets the lower vibration of acquired knowledge and comes together, and the heart forms this still point, this vibrational frequency that literally unifies the two.
Wow.
And that's where, when we think of an aura, we think, well, it must come out through the pores of the knees or the belly or whatever. It comes out from the heart. And if we go in and we look at the first chakra, the root chakra, the grounding chakra, the survival chakra, our relationship with Mother Earth, we could even go in and look at, if we wanted to ever explore the impact of Kundalini, or the way that shamans look at it. That first chakra, and some of the research shows that the variable in that particular chakra can be as low as 400 megahertz cycles per second and 800. And so if we go in and we look at grounding and we look at the frequency, and the one that's basically being embraced now is the 7.83 frequency, that's Mother Earth's heartbeat.
Yes.
So what it does is it takes that, the thoughts, the reality, the contamination, whatever we want to say in the lower frequencies, because Mother Earth is able to absorb that for us, and we connect with her. It brings our frequency up to that highest point, close to 8.
Yeah.
And then the second chakra goes to its highest frequency. The third chakra goes to its highest frequency. And then when those lower frequencies are at their highest peak and they enter into the heart, we're not bound by the past. We're not bound by the fears or even the chemistry changes in the body. And it makes it easier for this higher wisdom of who we are, pineal, 7th chakra, pituitary, 6th chakra, thyroid, 5th chakra, comes in, and it makes them all merge. And the 5th chakra is speaking our truth. Well, when we're out in nature, it's interesting. We don't have any need to talk. But what we talk about in our head and what we feel in our heart is absolute appreciation and gratitude.
Yes.
I mean, how many times, and you and I are outdoor people, how many times do we sit on a rock and tell that rock about how bad our life is?
Well, I mean, truthfully, I do.
Well, the trees we can, they're a little bit different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we don't sit down and wring our hands and go, oh, woe is me, life is just sucks and everything. And the
Right.
trees and the energy of Mother Earth and her heartbeat, she's transparent. It's like, okay, blah, 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 blah. And the energy just keeps on going. But that's what I found with the whole grounding and with the frequency. And, you take the 7.83, and if you go in and you look at the God frequency, which is 9.63, I think it is, that's so close.
It is.
That's so close.
Yes. And then there is the cycles of the craniosacral system.
Oh,
the
absolutely.
fluid flow from the up, what's called the 4th ventricle in the brain, down to the base of the sacrum and back up. And they say that's anywhere from 7 to 8 cycles per minute.
Yes.
So that's considered balanced.
Absolutely.
Now, I learned that independent of this. So what we're doing is balancing the craniosacral system to the Mother Earth's heartbeat.
Absolutely. And if we go in and we look at that 7.83 frequency, that Earth's heartbeat, as they call it, and we look at the vagus nerve, a cranial nerve number 10, and we look at the vagus nerve, and we start looking at the feedback system of that sophisticated nervous system that basically comes out, and one branch goes up into the lungs and the heart and the whole part, and the other part goes down into the belly and the Peyer's patch and all the things. Then what we start to see is we start to see how this earth frequency has a direct impact on the well-being of the vagus nerve and then all of the systems that it's connected to.
Yes. Okay. So how do we get out of the way of that? What do we do?
Literally, we just, and it may be because I live in Hawaii with everything, we just need to go outside. We just need, so very simply said, we need to stop staying in our heads so much and start learning to connect with our heart. and to see the world through the heart, and not so much the human heart that we think of with all of the broken heart and all the bad relationships, but look at that heart with the connection with the earth's heart, and all there is love. I know that it almost sounds like a Beatles song, all there is love,
Mhm.
but that's what that really, it's our conditioning that says that the mind trumps emotions,
Mhm. Right.
and that's not who we are.
No, and we've discounted emotions, by
Absolutely.
name three: happy, sad, and pissed off.
Yep.
And, Brene Brown's work, who I'm a big student of, 87, at least,
Yep.
at least 87 emotions that have been researched out.
Yep.
And then those emotions are linked to language. The richer your experience of language around emotions, the richer your connection to yourself and to others. It's like going
Absolutely.
to your most favorite place on earth and you can only describe your vacation there in 3 words. It's very limited how you would explain your visit, right? Or your experience. But if you had a lot more words, you could describe things much more fully and richly and things like that. And so I think that that's something that we need to consider, is even when we get into nature. I think we tend to go, I know that I have, well, if I'm going to go out in nature, I'm going to hike and I'm just going to get my heart rate up and I'm going to, get over that sand hill, the sand dunes that we live by. And I'm going to, do, and I thought, you know what? I just need to meander. I just need to walk. I
Yeah.
need to just be in presence. Um, and we live under trees in our backyard. We've got red pine and maple and some hemlock and Norwegian pine, and they all have something to say during the day when the
Oh,
breeze is coming through. And we have some Serbian pines as well. And it's just beautiful to just stop and listen to them.
absolutely.
Um,
It's like they sing. I was thinking about the emotions. Sadness is an emotion that we carry in the human heart. And if we look at heart attack and we were to do any conversation with anybody that has a heart attack and to find out where they were prior to it from an emotional standpoint, sadness is the number one thing.
yeah.
They're sad their life isn't going the way. When you said pissed off, so pissed off is inflammation in my world as a medical intuitive. It's a self-directed anger or resentment that disconnects us from ourself.
Okay.
And we're not even, from the soul's perspective, if I were to say to the soul, so are you angry? It would basically say, how do you spell that? It
Okay.
understands that we experience anger, but it doesn't buy into, if we experience anger, we are angry. And when we're angry, we have inflammation. And when we turn that anger into the self-directed qualities of it, which we've been conditioned to believe that somehow we're at the fault of everything, then what we do is we create the perfect setup physically for the immune system that wants to protect us. That's what it's designed to do its job, but then it's doing its job, but it's overdoing it and it's actually harming us. It's actually attacking us. It's like it's not getting the memo from the heart, like, oh, well, thank you very much. That was really good. So when we use those 3 emotions and we look at them, then what we can do is we can start to see why we have inflammation throughout the body, why we have inflammation in the heart, why we have inflammation in the gut.
Mhm.
Just through those 3 words. And one of the things that I found as a medical intuitive after all these years is that there's a difference between emotion and emotional. And there's a misnomer that if we express emotions, we are being emotional, and that's a judgment. And
Yes.
that makes us feel bad about ourselves. And
Mhm.
now we go back and now we start to overthink or feel the trauma of it. The body expresses it. It's like we're beating ourselves up and the body is feeling beat up and we get chronic pain. So there's all these connections. But the point is that something as simple as, and I'm going to use outdoors. And I love the products and everything, but I'm going to use outdoors, is that if you go outdoors, the heat of the sun is going to make you sweat.
Mhm.
and it's a great detoxification. It's how we're designed. And you go outside and you can't help but see beauty.
Mhm. Right.
And beauty is one of that's the soul. The soul only sees beauty. And so the grounding that we have with that just instantaneously changes everything. It
Mhm.
instantaneously changes everything.
Mhm.
Our job as humans is to go and to sustain that process, that routine, if we want to call it that. That's one of the nice things with these sheets, because we sleep every night,
Right.
unless we choose to sleep on a sofa or in a recliner or something. But,
Right.
just like you said, 20 minutes on either these grounding products or 20 minutes outdoor, just even if you sit and just take your shoes off and put your feet in the ground and it just recharges your batteries, literally.
Right. You could take a, beach towel,
Yeah,
a blanket outside and just sit on the grass. Take your shoes off
absolutely.
and sit on the grass. Because the DC, the direct current, will go through the cloth. It will conduct it. What blocks it is rubber. The synthetic material, our rubber-soled shoes,
Yep,
our cars, our bicycles, all the things that we travel in, our buses. Think trains, interestingly, do not, because that's metal. So that's fascinating to me. Um, but anywhere where there's rubber, it's going to block that conduction.
absolutely. And that's what it's designed to do.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's a protective barrier in its design to be able to kind of manage all the electromagnetics of this, what's going on. And we need those. We
Yeah.
need it. We need some of it, at least some of it.
Well, I had a number of pairs of shoes that were leather soled, and they were all like loafers and slip-ons that I wore forever. And then actually, I got away from that when, working as a physician, I worked on concrete all the time. And I
Mhm.
literally would just wear these shoes out so fast, and they were expensive shoes. And I'm like, okay, I just don't want to just rip through another pair of shoes. So I flipped over to rubber soles. And looking back over time, I can see that just more foot pain from standing, more foot pain from standing. And I never really realized that until you didn't have your connection, because you could actually feel connection through some of the concrete, because some of the buildings were single story and stuff like that. Or if you're walking outside in your shoes and things like that. So it's interesting that I think the fastest way to this for me is going to be sleeping. 100%. Sleeping on a sheet that has, as they do it, it's a cotton sheet that has silver threads through it. And then that's connected to the direct current. Um, and being in direct contact with that, just like when you're sitting on the earth or outside, you can feel just the calming sense that comes.
Mhm.
And so this has implications for blood pressure,
Oh, absolutely.
implications for blood sugar,
Yep,
implications for women who are what, pre, post menopausal. That's, if you're a woman, this is for you. Because
exactly, exactly.
it's all stages, because of how many swings we go through each month hormonally. Um, if you're stressed, this is for you, because it just calms you down. If you have anxiety, and we talk about that disconnection, because we're I just wonder if the disconnection gets compounded, because we're not aware of how disconnected we are.
Oh, absolutely. And that's so easy to happen with the demands and the information. And, technology is absolutely fabulous, but the amount of information that we have that is basically researched or whatever, is we're just inundated. We're constantly being forced to be in our mind. We're constantly being forced to evaluate and to monitor and to see if what we're reading matches who we are, and that creates an opposite that is an irritation, and it just goes on and on. And one of the things that I found with as I was reading all this and as we were talking is that, you know, in our humanist, Mary, we think, anyone who's familiar with chakras, we think that we're just seven chakras.
Mhm.
And that those seven chakras are tied to the physical body. But we actually have 12 chakras, which we'll probably talk about more maybe in the next podcast. But we actually have 12 chakras, and then we have a 13th chakra that is basically our connection with our highest divine self or the universe. But the reality of it is we have 144 chakras in the human body.
Okay.
And each one of those chakras, while they're maybe not as focused on or as defined, so example, in the feet. So in the feet, every toe has a chakra at the end of it. The ball of the foot has a chakra.
Mhm.
The heel has a chakra. The knee has a chakra. The hip has a chakra. The tailbone, the coccyx, has a chakra. And if we go in and we start looking at these, and we look at, when I say 144, we look at those chakras like through the balls of the feet. Then we have other little chakras that are tied to the nervous system.
Mhm.
So when we think of ourselves as being electromagnetic and being receptors, and especially through the feet, or like you say, sitting on the ground or laying on the ground, we are actually grounding and stabilizing all of the electromagnetic part of who we are, not
Yes.
just the seven chakras.
Yes.
And I think that's another reason that this has such strong implications for our general overall well-being, that can, in removing pain, can remove the painkillers that we want to take, or the managers of it, or even the antidepressants, or the Ritalin for ADD or ADHD or anything. I think that this ultimately is going to be part of this sound healing that we talk about, that ancients have talked about, that we're going to actually start using. And I think grounding is the first step.
I do too. Yes, because we talk about the pillars of health, and people have their ideas of what those are. Diet, exercise, stress reduction, um, emotions. And then I put in there now grounding. Absolutely. I think that's the first and foremost thing. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that connection to ourself and that connection to earth. Other things that I've noticed since, because I've been grounding now for about 3.5 weeks, is I don't care.
Yeah.
I care deeply, but I don't care. It's like,
Yeah, and and the mind goes in and goes, "Oh, well, you being apathetic." It's like, no, or you've just given up. No,
oh,
it's just that the things that would amp the nervous system up to change the chemistry of the body, it's almost like this grounding part comes in, and it's like, it doesn't say delete, because the way we're designed isn't like we're going to try to avoid everything. It's just basically like, okay, transparent, off it goes. And it's just, but again, it's important for people to know that when they hit these places of peacefulness and calm, that it isn't just the mind that's there. The whole physiology of the body is responding favorably, and it's calm.
it absolutely is. And I've also been doing some other work with a different professional, and the dialogue that I had with them a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago, was, when a person has a strong back and soft front, the approach to life where you have good boundaries, yet you're open and compassionate. That seems like a paradox where you're firm but kind. And sometimes it's hard to stand in that. And what they said to me, they said, well, something that they learned was, um, to respond to situations is to say, or to think, I have no defense and I have no arguments. So someone might get all fired up about something, and be accusatory or go off on a topic, and they're, pointing the finger at you and yelling at you or being upset. And you can literally be there and say, I have no argument and no defense to that.
And that's the healing qualities of the human body, is to respond. It's the reacting
Yeah.
that creates the chaos and that chemical change of fight, flight, freeze that puts everything in like hyper vigilance, hyper alert, and especially the immune system. It's like, oh my God, we've got this terrible thing going on. But when we respond, that comes from the heart.
Yes.
When we react, it comes from the mind. It's that simple.
Yes. And so I found in that this week I had plenty of opportunities to, and today was presented with numerous. Today's only in our world. Today's Monday. I don't know what day this podcast will be released, but today's Monday and we're recording. And I had plenty of opportunities today to be both defensive and argumentative. And I'm like, no, I really don't have anything to defend. And I just on the inside kind of chuckled to myself. I'm like, no, this is
If we
all
stop
good.
and think about it, it's opinions of the mind.
Yeah.
And when we can't argue with other people's opinions and hope to win,
Right. Right.
or to change them. They're their opinions. It's like,
Here's
okay.
the question I have: is this the fast track to transcendence?
It absolutely is. And transcendence is the highest frequency of the 7th chakra that puts us into the soul chakras, that basically tells us to just move beyond, and then, just literally move beyond, acknowledge where you are and move beyond. And it is transcendence. And that's a lot where the energy is right now. It's just basically, it's not saying to, forsake your world or your earthliness or anything like that. It's just saying, why don't you just rise above it? Even if that means just go to your heart. Why don't you just rise above it and look at it from a different perspective?
Right.
And that's what grounding does. Grounding just says, okay, let's look at it from a different perspective.
So it's possible then we're there sitting under the tree and enjoying, that there would be intrusive thoughts. Right? There would
Absolutely.
be worries that could come in. There would be anxieties that could flood us, right? One of the trauma responses, or our response to trauma, is flooding, right? When we get flooded, we just kind of. So in that situation, we can literally picture whatever that feeling or thought is coming through, just like kind of just going down through us into the earth, and the earth just taking it, or the wind just taking it, or we just offer it up as a prayer, as a thanksgiving, as a gratitude, as anything, as just an offering.
Absolutely.
And same with the emotion. We wouldn't have to attach to it. Should that emotion come through that's unfavorable, that's unsettling, that's disquieting, right? We could
Yes,
just.
and it's very interesting, because what I have observed in the work, that my own personal work, first and foremost, and then work with others, is that when, say, I'm like you painted the picture, I'm sitting outside and my mind just starts to calm. And I notice that, and calm to me is I become distracted by maybe a color of a tree, or, oh, look at that tree's got a piece of fruit on it, or golly, that tree has grown an inch, or in the case of our banyan, it's like, oh my God, she's got new growth on it. And then all of a sudden, like you said, because we're energetic, is that, and we get that feeling of this worry coming in, or we have this feeling of something being triggered, is that the earth basically says to us, is this yours or someone else's? We don't have to know if it's someone else. So if you're in this calm place and all of a sudden you start to feel worried, or you start to feel anxious, and you were to do something as simple as, is it mine? Is it theirs? And we don't need to know who there is. If it's not yours and you're taking it on, you're going to get anxious.
Yeah.
If it is yours and you're taking it on, you're going to be at ease. You're going to sit there and it's like, oh, there you are again. What can we do? How can we see each other? What do we need to change? And we go into this positive response versus this immediate reaction. So it's something as simple as that. And we've been led to believe that, you know, and it's hard to put into words, and it's not meant as a judgment by any means, but we are led to believe that we are the creator of everything.
Right.
No, sometimes we have an agreement to transmute that, but it doesn't always have to be our trauma that initiates it.
Right. Well, I think that gets confused with people when we say we manifest. To
Yeah,
manifest something is to really come in where something is out there in the, I guess, in the ethers, in the air, in the universe, in the energetics, and it comes and finally condenses to where it makes a difference. That's matter. So it existed before. It's just condensing enough to where we see it. It's like we don't see
absolutely.
steam, but we see the effects of steam, right?
Absolutely.
But when it comes to water, Lord knows we have no control over water when it takes charge, right? And same with ice. Look what happened to the Titanic. You have no control over what happens when you've got these things
No,
that are of matter. But before they were there in just a different energetic form.
absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, when you stop and think about, I was thinking when you said the Titanic, you know, being an intuitive, I'm going to go out on a limb. I would say 99% chance that none of the people on that Titanic consciously thought about an iceberg, thought about what the ramifications were going to be, thought about that fear part of it. They wouldn't have got on it. They would have, they didn't, how can I say this? They didn't set themselves up. They didn't create that. That was already there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when we say that we create our reality, our mind creates our reality.
Hmm.
And the reality of the soul, the reality of earth, the reality of her heartbeat, her everything about it is she doesn't see reality as our mind does.
Right. That's probably a good thing.
Probably a good thing. And I think that when we start going in, I mean, when I started, you know, we had that conversation about the grounding and so forth. I mean, it's like and I'm going to encourage the listeners to do the same thing. It's like, so before you go outside, set an intention.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that, and of course, this has probably to do with the book I'm writing on prayer, but I set the intention that when I go outside, I want to experience ease.
Hmm.
And when I got outside and I sat in that chair and it was uncomfortable and I didn't have the pillow right and it wasn't as whatever. And the minute I took my shoes off, I immediately went at ease. My body stopped hurting. The intention that I set was that. And then I was like a kid in a candy store with all the awe and the wonderment and the different ways that you see things. And that's all heart. That's
Hmm.
all our heart. So I
Yeah.
think grounding, simply said, I think grounding, what it does is it connects us with our heart, point blank. Very
Hmm.
simply said,
In the heart of the earth.
in the heart of the earth.
Yes. So, all right. So, everybody, all of our listeners, it's official. You're grounded. Get grounded.
Yes.
Don't get
And
in
and
trouble. Don't get a ticket. Don't go to jail. We don't mean that kind of stuff. Don't come out. We're not talking
don't
about.
get mentally stuck and trying to figure out what grounded is, and don't let your past come up and go, God, last time I got grounded, you know how that worked. How'd that work for you? Blah, 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 the way the mind does and everything. But it's just go and connect and feel that sense of belonging that right now, generally said, we're all craving so deeply
We are.
of knowing how we belong, where we belong, and we belong exactly where we are with Earth.
Yes. So, dear listeners, get grounded. There's going to be some resources. The number one resource are your bare feet in the earth. Number one. Number two, we'll have some things posted with the podcast for just some supplies, earthing shoes, sheets, bed sheets, and mattress and pads and things like that, that are the tools that you can use indoors. And again, Carol nor I do not have any commercial attachment to any of these. We don't promote anything. It's just resources that we found that were worked, that were genuine. The companies were reputable, and so our intention is just to pass off the good news to you guys and for everybody to have the effects of that. And then when you get the effects, please let us know. Reach out. What have you experienced? What have you noticed? What has changed for you? Because we'll share some of that down the road. So we're running out of time here on this podcast, and I invite the listeners to listen to our next one when that's released, because we're going to take grounding, lack of grounding. Now we're going to think we're, a little cosmic now. We're going to get existential for the next one.
Ooh, rub our hands together.
I know. I'm like, okay, I just have more questions. I don't think I have any answers in that one at all. So,
well, isn't that the way it's supposed to be?
oh, I hope so, because if so, then I'm succeeding greatly. So thank you for everyone who's listening. Go outside, get grounded, and we will see you next time on Cosmic Health and Wellness with Carol Ritberger and Mary Lauder. Thank you for joining us on the Since You Put It That Way podcast. Today's episode was written and produced by Crowded Table Productions. Technical editing, Malin Long Lopes. Sound editing, Jonathan Fiegel. Music, The River Jordan, written and performed by May Erlewine. Please rate and review our podcast as well. We appreciate your feedback, and hey, be positive, share the love.